Now, the city of Leicester has once boasted that it clothed the world. Now, the city's clothing industry, which is on the brink of extinction in the wake of scandals over sweatshop conditions, faces more challenges. A double threat in the form of competition from Chinese companies like Shein and Temu, as well as impending arrivals of cheap imports from India following a recent trade deal. Concerns it could spell now the end of the city's fashion business altogether. Sky's economics editor Ed Conway has been looking into this.
There's a phrase they say here: Leicester used to clothe the world. Once upon a time, clothes from Leicester were to be found in high streets and wardrobes around the globe. Today, it's a shadow of its former self. At this trade fair, they're trying to reclaim the city's proud heritage, and they have some work to do. During COVID, a flood of stories highlighting worker exploitation resulted in an inquiry, criminal investigations, and an exodus of big-name brands. Many of those companies are now sourcing from overseas rather than here.
What was the impact of all of that on this sector?
It's dramatically shrunk the businesses. There used to be 1,500 factories that were operating, creating 150,000 jobs in 2017. I know of about 100 factories that I would support.
There were 1,500 before?
There were 1,500,
There's now only 100?
Well, there's 100 that we know of.
1,400 businesses with thousands of workers just gone in the space of a few years. That's borne out by a new report from UKFT, Britain's fashion and textiles lobby group. It found that a staggering 95% of clothes companies have either trimmed or completely eliminated clothes manufacturers in the UK. Some 58% of brands by turnover now have an explicit policy not to source clothes from Britain.
This is the last mill that we've got. We were in there, and there.
Tejas is the third generation of textiles family. His firm once supplied the country's biggest brands. Now they're barely clinging on. On the other side of the road is another empty plant. This firm, who declined to be identified, used to supply Marks and Spencer's and Primark. Now there's only a few machines still running. The rest of the factory is, well, you can see for yourself.
Just 2-3 years ago, this was the single biggest production facility for dyeing textiles, essentially, not just in Leicester, but anywhere in the country around me. You can see these are the canisters that are used, that go into the machines, that create all of those amazing patterns. So, here's one of them. But there are thousands, and this is many years' worth of work, a kind of library of different designs, most of which, I'm afraid, are going to be destroyed because there are no buyers right now, and right now there is no activity.
While Leicester hogged the headlines in the heyday of fast fashion, its near extinction has barely been reported. But this is all happening now, in the past few months.
I hadn't realised it was quite so
Which
recent.
is why we don't like coming into this bit. It feels like we've been burgled. It feels like they've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left. I grew up with this noise and these machines. I used to sit with Dad, hand him parts to put on the machines, and now it's just an empty space that we've seen, and it hurts. It truly hurts.
That pain, felt across the sector, across the city, has been exacerbated by a new phenomenon: the rise of Chinese fast fashion brands Shein and Temu. Squeezed consumers turning to ultra-cheap clothes made in Chinese factories and delivered direct to UK households tax-free, thanks to a customs loophole called de minimis. There are still some factories left, some businesses still sending work to Leicester, but most brands still don't want to be associated with this place. For years, they squeezed the workers here until most of them eventually abandoned the city. If there is a light at the end of this tunnel, it feels further and further off. Ed Conway, Sky News in Leicester.
Well, I'm joined now by Alena Ivanova, who's the campaign's lead for the group behind Labour Behind the Label, which advocates for workers' rights in the clothing industry. Thanks so much for joining us. Give us a quick snapshot, first of all, on the scale of this industry in Leicester and the Leicester area 10, 20 years ago compared to today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you also for discussing this quite important topic. As a worker-centred and focused campaign, for us, obviously, the priority is the experience of workers in Leicester, garment workers, who in many cases have given decades of their lives and skills to this industry. These are predominantly women, many of them racialized workers, who don't know what to do and how to adapt to this changing business situation and the dyeing industry. But I think it's important to look at this in the global context as well. We know that brands would pursue cheaper prices at any cost, and they would routinely cut and run from places in order to source elsewhere where they can demand cheaper prices. And I think Leicester has very much suffered from that treatment from fashion brands. The priority now is to get commitments from high street brands, from smaller brands that are willing to stay, invest, take the time to develop a different kind of production in Leicester. I think everyone would agree UK manufacturing should not be trying to compete with the likes of Shein and Temu. It should find its own unique voice and unique selling point and focus on quality, focus on local sourcing, focus on the environmental benefits of producing in Leicester. All of these things would benefit workers as well if brands see this opportunity and grasp this opportunity.
So I guess what's suggested on that answer is that you don't really blame some brands for seeking cheaper alternatives overseas. You need what? Who do you blame, I guess, for the predicament that we're in?
Well, I definitely don't want to leave you with the impression that we're letting brands off the hook. This is the model that the entire industry is built on, right? To pursue ever cheaper prices. Now, what that means is essentially multiple generations of workers are left in the position that Leicester workers find themselves now. The argument that this exodus of Leicester is entirely predicated on poor working conditions and scandals, I think needs to be unpicked, because we work globally in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in Cambodia, and alert and urgent cases where abuse has happened come to us every day, and brands are not massively exiting those markets. So I think the idea that it's just a uniquely bad place to manufacture in terms of the reputational damage needs to be nipped in the bud. I think it is brands' lack of commitment to markets and sourcing places like Leicester that has seen the exodus for sure. But they also need to revisit their business model, because they are not going to outcompete Shein or Temu on price if they are committed to bare minimums on ethical practices.
Should the government be doing more to help this particular industry?
Of course, yeah. I think there is a lot of opportunity here that also the government could be grasping. We could be looking at public procurement and putting through contracts for things like NHS uniforms and other materials. We saw during the pandemic, unfortunately, that we found ourselves in a situation of critical shortages. There is facilities standing ready, as your report showed, ready to produce, ready to manufacture, and there could be a potential there for a much stronger relationship between the purchasers. In this case, that would be the state and the local suppliers, to guarantee that power dynamic where so far we've seen just the fashion brands dictate what is the price, demanding ever cheaper prices, is actually reversed, so that the industry has the time to recover, to invest back in new technology, in greener technology, for example, and really create a model for a different kind of production in Leicester.
Alena, thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated.